Hey, what's up, guys? Scotty here, just to teach you a little bit of how to do a modern metal mix in 2023. So to get started off, we're going to open up our mix console, and I like to take the approach of top-down mixing, as most people do these days, especially us gent boys. Following Nolly's top-down mixing approach is just the way to go. I am processing vocals on this song, but I'm not going to show that in this video. But just think of the instrumental bus and the stereo out as the same bus right now if we're just producing instrumental. So going from the top down, we got virtual tape machines. This is a trick Misha does on his master bus. It just adds a little bit of warmth and character to the mix. And then we got virtual mix rack here, boosting a bit of the high frequencies here, and then a bit of the low down here, and that's about it. And then we're trimming it just a hair above what Nolly would usually do. I like my mixes a little bit louder. I'm also adding a bit of saturation down here with the drive and the line. That's about it for virtual mix rack though. And then I'm also doing what Nolly does on his master bus here, where we're kind of just using this compressor to tame down the snare in the mix so it doesn't take over everything, because we do have a very explosive snare in this song. Just using the high pass filter, ratio right under 4 and threshold. You want to tune it, to your mix, but you always want to have a pretty fast attack and really fast release. I have a little bit of a slower attack here, 0.3, to let that snare transient cut through the mix, and then it kind of hits hard and tames that snare down. But yeah, that's the top down, and then that instrumental bus goes to stereo out, obviously, and then we're just using flatline as a limiter, but you can also use Pro L2 like Nolly does. I just experimented and I found out that flatline on this, actually just a preset here by Forrester Savo. I think I'm saying that right, but yeah, just using that preset sounded pretty good to me, so I decided to use that. But yeah, starting off after all the mastering, top down, you always want to mix into that. So we're going to start here with the kick drum. Let me line this up to where it's on a part where the kick will be repeating. So we are using the GGD-P4 kit here. And there's not much processing going on actually to a lot of my kit. We start out with this EQ. Here's how the kick sounds dry. And then I'm just doing this bit of an EQ here, lowering around 69 hertz. Nice. And we're raising that up a bit to get some more punch out of that kick. And then we're also trimming down around the 185 hertz frequencies just to let that bass cut through more in the mix, so the kick's not so muddy with the bass and it just is more prominent and blends with the guitar more. And then I also found this frequency here that I didn't like, so I cut it down a little bit. I heard it in the mix and I didn't like it, and then we're just doing a little bit of a low pass here. Very, very minimal, but it does cut out some of that high end. And we're doing a high pass here too, just to trim down the very, very low end that you can't even really hear, because sometimes it makes it feel like there's more low end in the mix when you cut out those frequencies you can't hear, and it makes it less muddy. Going after that EQ is GGD smash and grab. In grab mode, we are compressing the heck out of this thing here. Adding a little bit of high end with the air there makes it sound more punchy, and a tad bit of saturation there. Like I said, compressing this more than I probably should, but it sounds good in this context, so I decided to leave it. And then after that, I was experimenting with Maximizer. I don't even know what this does, honestly. Just made it sound fatter to me. I was just experimenting, and yeah, you can just hear what it does, really. Makes it sound way huger. Sits in the mix more to me. So I kept it on, and then I do automate it later on when the song kind of calms down and it's over that clean section. But yeah, that's about it for the kick. We can move on to the snare here real quick. Yeah, mute that. And then we'll head over to the snare sum. So I have my snare top and snare bottom routed to individual tracks, and then I send them to the snare sum over here. And that's where I do the processing. I just like to route them like this because you can tame the volumes how you like. for example, here I turned the snare bottom down just a hair to let that top come through a little more. But other than that, yeah, all the processing is on here. I'll go ahead and mute that snare verb so it doesn't kill our ears. That's how it sounds processed, and that's how it sounds raw. So I started off with some basic EQ like I do on most of my kit. You can see I really cleaned it up already. I was just clearing out those frequencies I really didn't like that were too ringy, for example. Frequencies like that you can just sweep around and find and then cut them. And then I'm boosting a little bit of this top end here just for the slightest bit of clarity. Didn't like this frequency either, so I timbered it down just literally half a decibel. Nothing crazy. Doing a slight high pass here just to simmer down on some of that low end of the snare, but there wasn't too much anyway. And then it goes into compression. Again, we are compressing the hell out of this snare. Adding a bit of top end with the air, no saturation. Taking a bit of low end out of the beef here. And then I have the output a little higher because I sounded quiet in the mix. And then that feeds into Soothe 2, which is a trick Nolly does as well. Basically just dimming down on some of the higher frequencies that are annoying that you can't really automate in a regular EQ. So that's just taking care of that for you. Yeah, and that's about it for the snare 2. It is getting sent to the snare reverb over here. There you go. There's that explosive reverb. We have it set at 3.13 seconds for the timing, and then obviously mix 100% because it's on a send here. And then I didn't really EQ too much here. I did post EQ because I put a EQ after the reverb, and I really cut down on this frequency here. That frequency was absolutely destroying the mix when I first put that reverb on. So I just did a bit of touch up and made it to where it was more audible and sounded great in the mix. But yeah, that's about it for the snare processing. Let's see if we can move on to the toms next. The toms, I am doing a bit of EQ on just the 2 toms I'm using in this entire song. The EQ is almost identical, just compensated for the higher tom versus the lower tom. And like I said, I'm only using the tom in one section of this song. Literally hit the tom twice in this song. I should use my toms more, but that goes for all of us probably. So let me go ahead and loop this tom for us. There we go. And after that EQ, they're just getting set to the tom bus over here. I can show you what that EQ does, I suppose. Let me turn off everything. Well, I think I meant to put that on there and accidentally moved it over. Yeah. Just really just cutting down on some ringing out frequencies. It's not a deal breaker. This is probably 5% of the mix. Like, you're not going to hear that if they're on or off. Most of the processing here is on the sum, where I do a trick that Nolly does that I learned from one of his mixing videos. 100% drive on Saturn really makes those fucking toms ring through. And then also goes into a limiter just so we can tame down those peaks. In this context, sounds heavily saturated, doesn't sound too pleasant, but when it's in the context of the mix, which is what matters, it sounds great. So yeah, that's about it for the toms, and then we can get into the overheads here. Not anything crazy going on here. We have the compressor and grab mode on the overhead setting, obviously, because we're on the overheads. Boosting a bit of high end with the air, not doing anything with saturation or beef. Very lightly compressed, I'd say. nothing too crazy. Threshold is about -20, and I'm raising the output because the cymbals were a bit quiet whenever I was mixing. I'll go ahead and give you the before and after. Mostly using it as an audio boost, not really compressing it. And then the EQ, just doing a bit of cleanup, cutting out some of that low end and boosting this for the snare. Adds a little bit of impact on that snare. Cuts out that gross kick you hear. You don't want that to get too muddy in the mix. And then I noticed the hi-hats were kind of still muddy in the mix, so I decided to boost the high end over here. Very controversial move, probably, but I think it worked. And again, he's doing the same thing with Soothe 2 on the overheads that's doing on the snare. Just trimming down some of those annoying frequencies you can't really automate. It would take years to automate. Moving on to the rooms, I did do a bit of automation on the rooms, which I can show you. Just turned it down about 5 dB because of how explosive that snare was, and this is a clean section and it just sounded way too busy and way too explosive for that section, so I just automated the volume to go down a little bit. See, yeah, versus but anyway, the processing on that starts off about any other track. Starts out with EQ, really cutting down that low end there, making it more explosive on the snare. Versus after the EQ. This cleaned it up, allows it to focus on the snare more. And then it's running into smash and grab. Again, surprise, I have it set on snare mode. Really over compressing this. Using a bit of saturation, boosting the high end with air. Without this, the snare wouldn't sound as powerful. And then it's running into Saturn 2 just for a little bit of extra sauce. As you can tell, this adds a lot more explosion and character to that snare. Nothing what it sounds like stock, obviously. But yeah, that's about it for the entire kit. All of it is routed to the drum sum here, and then that just has a limiter to tame down some of those peaks. And then there's also Valhalla Room because I have the actual stock kit reverb turned off, and it sounded very dry, so I just put a 3.2% Valhalla Room on here. I really like how Room sounds on my drums, so I kept that there. And then the snare is routed to snare reverb, and then the rest of the kit is routed to parallel compression. And this is what my parallel compression looks like, barely anything at all, just mixing that compressed kit back into the regular kit to make it sound more consistent. And then I have the snare reverb dialed over here. But yeah, that is pretty much how my kit sounds. And yeah, that's about it for my drum processing. Tune back in next time. I'm going to go over the guitar and bass processing and how I got those to sound the way they did. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you guys around. Subscribe and like for more content like this. Yeah, see ya.